This is Design Safe Radio, where natural hazards researchers strive to make our society more resilient to everything nature throws at us.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Design Safe Radio. Super excited to bring to you my good friend, Dr. Ian Robertson, all the way from sunny Hawaii. Welcome, Ian. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be on.
And thanks for getting up early and starting your day here.
Not that early. No,
I guess it's not as early as it usually is when we're talking. You're usually zero dark 30 over there.
Right. The sun is shining outside, so it's a beautiful day. Come and visit.
I can't wait until we get that opportunity. We'll wait until everybody else has gotten their Hawaii out of their system. Now that we're getting to the tail end of the pandemic, we hope.
It has been a little busy. Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of visitors.
So we're talking today because you're part of the team that has been putting together and doing the different evolutions of the NHERI Science Plan, which is a really important topic that we haven't gotten to talk too much about yet. So can you give us a little bit about the background of the science plan, how it kind of came together to get us started here?
Sure. So as you know, NHERI, Natural Hazards Engineering Research Infrastructure, is a follow-on to NHERI. NHERI was the Network for Earthquake Engineering Simulation. And NHERI never had a science plan. And it was one of the failings because it meant that there wasn't a central guidance for researchers in NHERI. Sure, there was a focus on earthquake and to a lesser extent tsunami, which are earthquake triggered. But that was something that was lacking. NSF realized that, and in the commissioning of NHERI, and particularly the NCO, the Network Coordinating Office, headquartered in Purdue, the NSF required that we develop a NHERI science plan to guide the effort through the first 5 years, and now the extension for the next 5 years. So that was a good move. We, as the NCO, put together a science plan task group early on, and in 2017, they published the first version of the NHERI Science Plan. It was based primarily on the science plans that each of the individual components of NHERI had also been required to develop. Now, obviously, their science plans weren't terribly coherent because they were developing them individually. So what the Science Plan Task Group did was to combine those into a coherent Science Plan 2017. However, there were a couple of components of NHERI that took a little longer to be established. NCO was one of them, but also the Simulation Center and Converge, which is a social science aspect to the hazard engineering community, was added fairly recently. In addition, so it was necessary to update that first version of the science plan. So in 2018, the NCO organized a workshop, international workshop, but also focusing on emerging technologies, on disruptive technologies, on the science of team science, and trying to incorporate these into NHERI efforts. And so that became the second science plan, the second edition of the science plan, which is available now on NHERI, on the Design Safe website. The simplest way to find it, the URL is a little long, so the simplest way to find it is to search for NHERI, N-H-E-R-I, Science Plan. And it'll come up as the first, at least on Google search, it'll come up as the first one. And so it's a great improvement over the first edition, but still is a little lacking. We feel there's less emphasis on the simulation side and what SimCenter can do for the research facilities and for the community at large, and possibly not enough emphasis on the social science aspects of what we're doing. How does what we're doing as hazard engineers relate to the communities for whom we're doing it?
Yeah.
So the plan is that we've just been renewed, the NCO has just been renewed for another 4 years. And in that 4 years, in fact, early in that 4 years, we will be developing a third version of the science plan to incorporate these simulation and social science aspects. So that's the history.
It's not a coincidence that we're talking about the science plan today. And we talked about offline earlier that I've been developing some presentations. I'm actually working on a planning workshop, and one of the things that we talk about in there is, I like how you said this, was essentially a plan is all the activities that prepare us for coordinating action toward a particular future or desired end state. And it sounds like
Correct.
what the NHERI Science Plan does is present, these challenges, these research questions that we want to coordinate all of our NHERI efforts towards, and then some of the roadblocks that we may encounter along the way, and how to maybe avoid those problems in the first place, or help those that we're serving avoid problems in their own lives and the built environment, mitigating the effects of hazards in communities, and putting backup plans in place. That kind of encapsulate some of the things that are in there.
Exactly. And the first science plan did a good job of establishing that base, that sort of foundation of what it is NHERI is trying to do. And to do that, it developed 3 grand challenges. And those grand challenges, the first one is to identify and quantify the characteristics of the hazards we're dealing with: earthquake, windstorm, and the related hazards of tsunami and storm surge. So if we don't understand the hazard, then it's very difficult to deal with it. So that's fundamental. The second was to assess the physical vulnerability of civil infrastructure and the social vulnerability of populations in communities exposed to these hazards. So we have to understand how our buildings are going to perform, existing buildings, because that's what we have at the moment, and the existing communities, people living in those communities, but also how do we mitigate that hazard or the risk for those communities, and how do we improve design in the future so that we're not adding to this vulnerable building stock. And then finally, create the technologies and engineering tools to design, construct, retrofit, and operate a multi-hazard, resilient, and sustainable infrastructure for the nation.
Ooh, that's a mouthful.
Yes, indeed. And we're chipping away at it. Every experiment performed in NHERI has as its goal improving our future resilience to these natural hazards. So establishing those as the 3 grand challenges gives researchers, especially young researchers trying to propose research or develop research proposals for NSF, gives them a target. It gives them a clear, this is the challenge I'm tackling. I want to understand windstorms better, or I want to figure out how to retrofit existing buildings for storm surge and wave action. And they can refer to the science plan as the source of that need, that requirement. So those 3 grand challenges have not changed. We tweaked them a little bit in the 2nd edition, but they're unlikely to change because they're fundamental to what NHERI is about.
Yeah, and by the definition, a grand challenge is not something you can solve within 5 years, most likely.
No, exactly. It normally takes longer. And so it is a good thing that NSF has extended NHERI for another 5 years. That gives us a chance to chip away a little more and maybe make more of a difference.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Design Safe Radio. This show is sponsored by the National Science Foundation grant number 1612144. You can subscribe to Design Safe Radio on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you find your podcasts. Please leave us a review so we can improve the show. Please also help others find our episodes in iTunes. Thanks for your feedback and support. You can find out more about NHERI at designsafe-ci.org, on Facebook at Design Safe Radio, or on Twitter at NHERI Design Safe.